We're going to demonstrate really three kinds of attacks or demonstrations that we really do control the touchscreen. In the first one, we're going to basically remotely push buttons. So you'll be able to see that while no one's actually operating a touchscreen, from a distance we can cause certain buttons to be pressed. Secondly, we're going to show the ability to allow the voter to input certain buttons, and then we will intercept that and instead introduce our own sequence of button pushes. And finally, we're going to show something that's probably the most relevant attack for vote tampering. That's where we go ahead and let the voter push a number of different buttons. But when he or she gets ready to register those votes to push the Vote Now button, we will simply intercept that attempt to push the Vote Now button, change a few of the votes, and then go ahead and send the Vote Now so that the votes are actually registered. And in order to do this, we blank the screen temporarily so that the voter doesn't see that there's some revoting going on prior to the final registration of the votes. Certainly the microprocessor can keep track of who the voters are voting for, and we don't have to tamper with those votes if the voter is voting for the candidate that we, the bad guys, want to win the election. Also, it's important to recognize that we don't necessarily have to change all the votes in the entire election. We may be interested only in one or two particular positions that candidates are running for. So the actual fiddling with the actual votes chosen may be relatively modest. On the other hand, it's entirely possible to go and change all the votes that any one voter is voting for. Now these attacks, these insertions of the alien electronics that allow us to do the man-in-the-middle attack, which really is a microprocessor in the middle attack, but it's traditionally called a man-in-the-middle. This, in theory, could be done during the election, but that requires a high probability of being detected. The more realistic way to insert these alien electronics is to do it while the voting machines are waiting in the polling place a week or two prior to the election. Often the polling places are an elementary school or a church basement, or some place that doesn't really have a great deal of security. Or the voting machines can be tampered while they're in transit to the polling place, or while they're in storage at the warehouse between elections.
One really nice thing about this attack, the man-in-the-middle, is that there's no soldering or destruction of the circuit board of any kind. You can remove this attack and leave no forensics evidence that we've been there.
Unfortunately, we didn't have the software to run an actual election, so you're going to see a demonstration of how we control the touchscreen, and you kind of have to use your imagination to see how that could be applied to actually tampering with the voting.
There's the first one, second one, and third one.
In this next scene, think of the pressing of four numbered keys as the voters selecting four candidates. Think of the OK button as the Vote Now button that would register the votes. When this button is pushed, the alien microprocessor blocks the Vote Now button, very briefly blanks the screen so the voter is unaware of what is happening, quickly votes for four different candidates, then executes the Vote Now function to record the wrong votes.
Entering the numbers 4, 5, 6, and 7 generate an incorrect PIN code. This attack, what we're going to do is we're going to enter the same 4, 5, 6, and 7. When I hit the OK button, the circuitry inside the machine will clear the incorrect PIN numbers, insert the correct PIN numbers, and then forward to the supervisory menu screen.
Let's see that again and note that we blank the screen out. This is important because when the voter hits the Vote Now button to register his votes, we can blank the screen and then go back and vote differently, and the voter will be unaware that this has happened. The clicking sound with additional voting can be toggled on and off remotely, so there will be no indication to the voter that additional voting is taking place. We could certainly miniaturize the alien electronics we've inserted inside the voting machine, making it much harder to detect, but since almost no one opens up voting machines to check for alien electronics in the interior, this is probably unnecessary. Note that there is no soldering or damage to the printed circuit board, so that when we're done with the attack, we can simply remove the alien electronics, and there's no evidence whatsoever that tampering ever occurred. While this is not uncommon, it should not be this easy to gain access to the interior electronics of a voting machine. The attackers need merely to cut out the connector, allowing access to the interior of the electronics. This can then be repaired cosmetically, but because almost no one checks this connector, it probably isn't even necessary to do that.
The voting module can be removed from the base simply by sliding. This gives you access to the printer pins, therefore you do not need to pick the lock in order to gain access to the printer.
This is a test printout from the printer and demonstrates that we can control what is being printed.